The slap cracked across the bar like a gunshot. For 1 second, nobody moved. Not the bartender, not the old men at the pool table, not the waitress with the empty glasses, not the 4 rangers in the corner booth, suddenly too drunk to laugh and too sober to breathe. The young woman's head turned with the force of the blow. A thin line of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox stood over her with his hand still hanging in the air, his face twisted by whiskey, ego, and the confidence of a man used to hurting people who never hit back. "Sit down, little girl," he said. His friends laughed, but the laugh died quickly. The woman did not cry. She did not scream. She did not touch her bleeding lip. She simply turned her face back toward him, slow and calm, as if the slap had not surprised her at all. Cole leaned closer. "What's wrong? You scared?" The woman looked at him, eyes dark, steady, and empty. Then she said 5 quiet words. "I gave you a warning." Cole thought she was bluffing. He thought she was just another quiet woman in the wrong bar at the wrong time. He had no idea that the silver ring hanging from her neck was not jewelry. He had no idea that the scar beneath her hoodie had a classified medical code attached to it. He had no idea that one word hidden inside a small black coin case could turn a bar fight into something men in uniform would spend 12 years trying to bury. Valkyrie. Some women do not need to threaten you. They only need to stand up. The bar was called Miller's Rest, 2 miles outside Fort Camden, between a closed tire shop and a gas station that sold bad coffee and maps nobody used anymore. It was where soldiers drank when they wanted no officers watching. At 8:17 p.m., Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox entered with 3 ranges. Sergeant Blake Turner, who laughed because it was safer than disagreeing. Corporal Dean Walsh, young and mean, and Private First Class Ryan Bell, quiet and sober enough to know the night was turning ugly. Cole had 11 years in the Army, 3 deployments, 2 commendations, a reputation as the best close-quarters fighter in his battalion, and a disciplinary file that kept disappearing because powerful men liked having someone like him around when rules needed bending. Behind the bar stood Frank Miller, owner of Miller's Rest for 27 years. His name was stitched over his shirt pocket. Frank. Before the bar, Frank had been a Navy corpsman. He had seen brave men, broken men, dangerous men, and men who confused loudness for strength. Cole belonged to the 4th category. In the back booth near the emergency exit sat Mara Ellison, 36, dark hair, gray hoodie, faded jeans, old boots, water instead of whiskey. She had chosen the only booth with a clear line to the front door, hallway, mirror, and emergency exit. Frank noticed. People who had never been hunted chose seats for comfort. People who had lived through danger chose seats for exits. Frank refilled her water. "You military?" Mara's fingers stopped for a fraction of a second. "No longer." As Frank left, he saw a deep scar beneath her hoodie. Blast fragmentation. Close range. The kind of wound survived only if God blinked at the right second. Mara touched the silver ring on her necklace. The ring had belonged to a man whose name no longer appeared on any public memorial. A man erased because the mission that killed him had never officially happened. Mara wore it because the Navy could erase records, but not guilt. Cole noticed Mara because men like Cole always noticed quiet women. Quiet looked like weakness to him. He called her Hoodie Girl. She ignored him. Bell warned quietly, "Staff Sergeant, maybe leave it." Cole shut him down and crossed the bar. Mara heard his chair scrape, his boots shift, the liquid in his glass, and the shortened stride from his bad right knee. He was drunk, but not helpless. Still dangerous. "Well," Cole said at her booth, "you deaf or just rude?" "I'm not interested." "Not interested in what?" "Whatever this is." He slid into her booth. She told him to get out. He boasted about being Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox, 2nd Ranger Battalion. She said nothing. Her calmness humiliated him. Cole tapped the silver ring. What's that? Dead husband? The room changed. Mara closed a hand around his wrist. Take your hand off me, she said. You don't give me orders. I just did. Cole tapped the ring again. Whatever man gave you that, he should have taught you when to keep your mouth shut. Silence thickened. Mara pressed her thumb once against the ring. Walsh called from the booth. Come on, Staff Sergeant. Don't let her punk you. Cole stood. You think you're tough because you stare like that? No. Then what? I think you're drunk. I think you're embarrassed. I think your men are watching, and I think you're about to make a decision you can't take back. Cole leaned in. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. His hand moved before Bell could stand. The slap cracked across Mara's face. For 3 seconds, Cole felt powerful. Then Mara turned back slowly, blood on her mouth, and said, I gave you a warning. She stood. The room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to her. Frank reached for the phone. Mara saw his stitched name in the mirror. Don't call the police yet, Frank. Cole faltered. Mara stepped closer. Bad right knee. Old hand fracture. Left shoulder never healed clean. You drink with your weapon side open because you've never had to fear anyone in a room like this. You are not the first man to mistake silence for fear. Cole reached for her. Mara moved like a door closing. Wrist caught. Thumb turned. Shoulder shifted. Foot behind his bad knee. He was on his knees before pride understood physics. Walsh lunged. Mara used his own momentum and touched the nerve bundle under his ribs. He folded. Bell stood with hands visible. I don't want any part of this. Good choice, Mara said. Cole's rage turned to calculation. Call the MPs. Tell them she attacked us. He threatened Bell. You didn't see anything, unless I tell you what you saw. Turner and Walsh supported the lie. Frank objected. Cole noticed Frank glance at the camera. Turner knew the old DVR fed into a locked box above Frank's office. Mara moved, but Cole grabbed her ankle just long enough to delay her. She could have broken 3 bones, but restraint was the only thing keeping this from becoming the brawl Cole wanted. In the hallway, metal cracked. The red recording light went dark. Turner returned with the hard drive. Now, Cole said, it's 4 soldiers against 1 unstable woman. Mara looked disappointed. You still think this is about witnesses? During the struggle, the silver ring case broke open. Inside was a matte black challenge coin. One side bore a black trident. The other had one word. Valkyrie. Bell went pale. He had heard the word once from a senior operator at 2 in the morning. Not a name. A warning. A story men stopped telling when officers entered the room. Frank's eyes shifted, not to the broken camera, but to the old cigarette machine by the restroom. Mara saw it. Cole did not. Bell looked at the coin, the broken camera, Turner's hard drive, and Mara's bleeding mouth. Cole Maddox had not started a bar fight. He had opened a classified grave. Before the MPs ever arrived, before Cole learned the cost of touching the wrong woman, the room had already chosen sides in silence. That was the thing Mara noticed first. Nobody in Miller's Rest wanted trouble, but everyone knew what trouble looked like when it wore a uniform and laughed too loudly. The waitress, Tina, kept wiping the same table, though there were no spills left on it. The old men at the pool table pretended to study their next shot, but their hands had stopped moving. Frank kept his eyes on the bottles behind the bar because looking directly at a storm did not stop it from breaking. Mara knew the language of rooms. Every room had pressure points. Every room had exits. Every room had cowards, witnesses, predators, and people who did not yet know what they were. Belle was the last kind. He had not laughed when Cole called her hoodie girl. He had not stopped Cole either. That placed him somewhere in the gray, and Mara had spent enough years in gray places to know that gray could become either light or rot depending on the next order. Cole did not notice any of this. He noticed only the parts of the world that confirmed his power. The way Turner laughed half a second too late. The way Walsh watched him for permission before becoming cruel. The way civilians looked away when he raised his voice. He mistook all of that for respect. It was not respect. It was fatigue. People got tired of challenging men who made every small disagreement feel like a test of dominance. When Cole tapped the ring the first time, Mara's mind did not go to the bar. It went to sand under her knees, smoke in her lungs, Daniel Vale's hand shaking as he pressed cold metal into her palm. She remembered the impossible light from the east wall after the blast. She remembered carrying a man whose blood soaked through her sleeves so deeply that, for weeks afterward, even clean water had smelled red. She remembered Greer's voice on a radio that kept cutting in and out, telling her to keep moving when all she wanted was permission to stop. That was why she warned Cole instead of striking him first. Not because she feared him. Not because she could not end the encounter. Because every violent man believed he was the exception until someone made him ordinary. Mara had made too many men ordinary. She had learned the cost. A broken wrist healed. A broken record followed you forever. So she gave him chances. She gave him silence. She gave him words. She let him choose the shape of the night. When his hand finally crossed the distance between them, the whole bar heard more than impact. Frank heard a report being written before truth had time to stand up. Bell heard the moment his own cowardice would ask to be forgiven. Turner heard opportunity. Walsh heard permission. Cole heard victory. Mara heard Daniel Vale. Get the living out. That was why she stood. Not for pride. Not for revenge. For the living. For the truth, still breathing in the room. For Frank, who had already seen too many lies survive because tired men signed tired papers. For Belle, who had not yet decided whether his fear would become his character. For herself, because 12 years of silence had not made the past smaller. It had only made smaller men brave enough to touch it. The moment the coin hit the floor, the night stopped being local. The black trident caught the bar light, and in that small shine, several people saw the shape of something larger than any of them. Frank saw an old radio channel he had prayed never to hear again. Bell saw a rumor that suddenly had a face. Turner saw danger, but not enough of it. Cole saw a coin and thought objects could be taken, hidden, controlled. That was Cole's second mistake. His first was believing Mara was alone. The first MP cruiser arrived 7 minutes later. Miller's Rest felt like a crime scene that had not decided who the criminal was yet. Cole sat near the pool table, with his arm pressed to his chest. Mara knew his shoulder was not broken. Painful, yes. Useful, yes. Enough to look like a victim if someone wanted to believe him. Turner had hidden the torn hard drive. Bell stood apart, in the empty space between truth and survival. Mara sat in her booth, hands visible, blood dry at her mouth, the black coin hidden again. 2 MPs entered, then Lieutenant Aaron Price. 28, clean uniform, clean confidence. Price recognized Cole's name before his face. Ranger of the Year, Base Combatives Champion. 2 commendations, photo with Colonel Hensley. Men like Cole usually arrived in reports as decorated soldiers, not suspects. That was the first invisible weight placed on the scale. Price asked what happened. Cole spoke first. "She attacked us." Frank said, "That's a lie." Cole performed well. Injured, controlled, professional. "She approached us, started acting erratic. I tried to de-escalate. She attacked." Frank insisted Cole slapped Mara. Cole accused Frank of flirting with her, making Frank look emotional. Price wrote, "Conflicting statements, possible civilian assault, military personnel injured." The lie was already growing bones. Give it one report and it would learn to walk. Frank revealed the main camera system was damaged. He accused Turner of ripping out the hard drive. Turner denied it. Price found the DVR open and the drive gone, but asked Frank if he had proof. Frank said, "You mean besides me telling you I saw him do it?" Price's silence answered. Frank said, "This is exactly how it starts. Men with rank deciding what truth is before the blood dries." Mara calmed him with one word. "Frank." She was preserving the witness. Bell noticed black grease on Turner's sleeve from the DVR housing. Turner noticed Bell noticing. Price told Mara she had to come in for questioning. Mara predicted he would photograph Cole's shoulder and Walsh's ribs before her face, then write her injury as a minor laceration. Sergeant Dana Holt glanced up, recognizing the truth. Price ordered cuffs. Holt suggested separate statements, but Price overruled her. Mara turned slowly and accepted the cuffs. During the pat-down, Holt found the broken ring case and black coin. She turned it over and read Valkyrie. Price did not know the word. Ignorance with authority made him dangerous. "Bag it," Price ordered. Mara said, "Lieutenant, if that coin goes into evidence, the next phone call you receive will not come from this building." He bagged it anyway. For the first time that night, Holt saw something human cross Mara's face. Not fear, loss. As Mara was taken out, Bell almost spoke. Cole's presence stopped him. Bell managed only, "I think we should all give statements separately, sir. Not truth, but not the lie." At the door he whispered, "I'm sorry." Without turning, Mara said, "Not yet." Inside the bar, Frank waited until no one watched. The old cigarette machine had not sold a pack in 8 years. People thought it was nostalgia. It was not. Frank had promised himself that if truth ever bled on his floor, he would not let paperwork bury it. Behind a magnetic panel was a battery-powered, motion-triggered backup recorder. Frank removed something small. Bell saw only Frank's hand close around, something small enough to save a woman and get a man killed. At Fort Camden's MP station, Mara sat cuffed in interview room 2. Price asked her name, address, occupation. She answered, "Retired from service." When he asked the branch, she said, "You want a category that fits your report." Price typed her name. Access restricted. He tried the military database. Access denied. Naval Special Warfare Command authorization required. For the first time, Price's confidence slipped. "Who are you?" "Someone your report is not cleared to describe." Price stepped out and called command. He was told to stop processing her. Mara said the call was not from Fort Camden Command. It came from above them. Then the wall phone rang. Price answered, "Yes, Admiral." He paled. "There is a Rear Admiral Thomas Greer on the line." Price said Greer's first instruction was, "Nobody touches the coin." Price whispered, "What is Valkyrie?" Mara looked at him and said nothing. What made the MP station dangerous was not the walls or the cuffs or even the men who believed Cole. It was the paperwork, waiting in blank fields on Price's screen. Empty boxes had power. Once filled, they became memory. Once printed, they became fact for anyone too busy or too frightened to ask what had been left out. Mara had watched it happen before. A phrase like unstable female could replace a lifetime of service. Minor laceration could replace a slap. Conflicting accounts could replace intimidation. Camera unavailable could replace evidence destroyed by a man with motive. There were many ways to lie without inventing a single sentence. You only had to decide which truths did not deserve a box. Sergeant Holt understood that more quickly than Price. She did not have Price's rank, but she had something rank often dulled: attention. She noticed how Cole spoke over everyone. She noticed Turner's sleeve. She noticed Bell's eyes every time the word statement came up. She noticed that Mara never once asked what would happen to her. The guilty usually wanted to know the charge. The frightened wanted to know the punishment. Mara wanted to know whether the log was recording. That told Holt something. Price was not a bad man. That was part of the problem. Bad men were easy to fear. Decent men who trusted systems too quickly were more dangerous because they could do harm while believing they were keeping order. Price had entered Miller's Rest, ready to be fair. Then he saw 3 injured soldiers, 1 decorated staff sergeant, 1 angry bartender, 1 calm woman with blood on her mouth and a broken camera. The story arranged itself for him before he realized he was helping it stand. Mara watched him make that mistake in real time. She did not hate him for it. Hate required surprise. She had none left for men who confused neatness with truth. When the database refused her name, the room's center of gravity shifted. Price stared at "Access Denied" as if the screen had insulted him personally. Holt did not stare at the message. She stared at Mara. A restricted file could mean many things. Criminal investigation, witness protection, intelligence work, sealed medical record, classified operation. But the second message carried weight even Holt could feel. Those words did not belong in a routine assault intake. They did not belong beside a woman in a gray hoodie with cuffs on her wrists. They did not belong in Price's world, which had been built from forms, duty rosters, incident codes, and command channels. Then the coin became heavier than evidence. Price had bagged weapons, wallets, phones, knives, pills, watches, and keys. He had never seen an object change a room after being placed in plastic. The pouch on Holt's belt looked small, but everyone began to behave as if it contained an alarm. Mara had warned him. The next call would not come from this building. When it came, Price understood a lesson usually learned too late. Some objects were not evidence because of what they proved. They were evidence because of who came looking for them. Outside the interview room, Bell sat with his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. He replayed the slap over and over, each time giving himself a better role. In one version, he stood before Cole across the bar. In another, he told Price the truth immediately. In another, he grabbed Turner before the DVR cracked open. But memory did not revise itself for cowards. It only replayed the moment they became one. Inside Miller's Rest, Frank slid the memory card into his sock and felt ridiculous for half a second. Then he remembered triage tents, missing reports, and officers who asked for language that sounded cleaner than blood. Ridiculous was survivable, unprepared was not. By the time Admiral Greer's voice entered the station, the night had already split into 2 stories. Cole's story was faster. Mara's story was older. And somewhere between them sat the truth, waiting for someone brave enough to carry it without dropping it. Price held the phone like it weighed more than it should. Greer learned Mara was restrained and ordered the cuffs removed. Holt obeyed quickly. Greer wanted to speak to Mara. Mara asked if the room was recording. Price told Greer, then noted the time, and paused, recording by direct order of Rear Admiral Thomas Greer. He had not deleted anything, but he had marked the exact second ordinary police work became something else. Mara took the phone. "Admiral." She listened, then said, "No, sir. I did not start this." Then with pain in her voice, he touched the ring. After the call, Price returned the coin. Greer said Mara was not under arrest, but she was not to leave the station. Mara said, "That sounds like him. It means I'm free enough to stand and trapped enough to be useful." "To who?" Holt asked. "To the past." At Miller's Rest, Cole called Colonel Robert Hensley, his powerful backer. Cole reported a civilian female assault. Hensley only became alarmed when Cole said the woman's name. Mara Ellison. Then the coin. Black trident, word on the back. "What word?" "Valkyrie." Hensley cursed quietly. "Do not put anything else in writing. Where is the footage?" "The main DVR, yes." "The main DVR?" Hensley ordered him to find backups. "If that woman is who I think she is, You did not assault a civilian tonight. You kicked a classified door. Inside the bar, Frank had the memory card hidden in his sock. Bell confronted him. Frank asked if Bell planned to tell Maddox or tell the truth. Bell said Maddox would ruin him. Frank said, "Men like Maddox don't ruin you all at once. They teach you to ruin yourself one quiet moment at a time. You already gave him one." Bell said, "I didn't lie." "No, you just left the truth standing alone." Cole returned, no longer drunk. Fear had burned the whiskey out of him. He demanded to know where the other camera was. Frank denied it. Bell found a first small muscle twitch of courage and said more evidence tampering would look bad. Cole called him a coward. Frank understood. Not courage yet, but the first movement toward it. At the MP station, Holt brought Mara water. Holt said Greer sounded scared, not of Mara but for her. Mara said Greer had carried too many ghosts. Holt asked if Mara was one. Mara gave the first fragment. 12 years ago, a mission that officially did not exist. The map said no Americans were there. The press release said no operation. The casualty report said training accident. "If I tell you, you become part of it." "Part of what?" "Black Lantern." Price entered and heard the last words. "Now you're part of it too," Mara said. Price then reported a call from Hensley claiming Maddox was decorated and Mara's identity unverifiable. Mara called it the second story, the clean command version with better structure and more paperwork. Mara demanded chain of custody for the coin. She warned that scanning it could trigger alarms. Holt stopped a clerk just before the evidence pouch was scanned. Meanwhile, Cole's false story spread through texts. Crazy civilian chick attacked Rangers at Miller's. Lies did not need reports first. They needed speed. Bell received a message. "Keep your mouth shut." He did not delete it. Frank drove to a 24-hour print shop, paid cash, and loaded the memory card. The backup angle was low and dusty, but enough. Cole, crossing the bar, touching the ring, standing, slapping Mara. Frank copied the file to a flash drive, cloud storage, and an email to Thomas Greer. "You need to see what happened to Mara Ellison tonight." Greer opened it at Naval Station Norfolk. He watched the video 3 times. On the slap, he stood so fast his chair hit the wall. He ordered legal, the Warcom liaison, and fastest transport. "Someone put hands on Valkyrie." Back at Fort Camden, Hensley called Price and demanded, "Jurisdictional cleanup. Keep it local. Remove classified references. No Greer." Price translated it for Mara. "Civilian assault on military personnel. No coin. No naval special warfare." Outside, multiple military vehicles arrived. Mara said if they were Hensley's men, the station had become unsafe. If Greer's, it had become a battlefield, not with bullets, with orders. The first time Mara heard the words Black Lantern spoken aloud after Coast. She had been sitting in a Navy hospital room with one lung bruised, 2 ribs cracked, and Daniel's ring closed inside her fist. Greer had stood by the window with a file he could not let her read and an apology he could not make official. He had told her the operation would be sealed until review. She had understood then that sealed meant buried. Men rarely used honest words when dishonest ones came with authority. Now, 12 years later, the same name moved through Fort Camden like a match dropped in dry grass. It reached people who knew too little and people who knew too much. It made Hensley get dressed before he was called. It made Greer order transport before he had jurisdiction. It made Voss begin preserving records before anyone admitted there was something to preserve. Cole, for all his cruelty, understood danger in simpler terms. He had built his life on the idea that fear moved downward. Officers frightened staff sergeants frightened privates, soldiers frightened civilians, men frightened women. That was the ladder he trusted. But Valkyrie bent the ladder into a circle. Suddenly, Fear came from above, below, and behind him. Frank had evidence. Bell had doubt. Mara had a name Cole did not understand. Greer had authority that did not ask Cole's permission to exist. That was why Cole went after the backup. Not because he knew the full truth, but because he sensed the structure that protected him beginning to make sounds like old wood in a fire. Frank saw that too. When Cole demanded another camera, Frank felt the old battlefield rule return. If a man asks the wrong question, never answer the right one with your face. So Frank lied with posture. He shrugged like a tired bartender. He folded towels. He looked Cole in the eye exactly long enough to seem insulted and not long enough to seem afraid. Bell watched both men and learned something important. Courage was not always a speech. Sometimes courage was an old man pretending to be weaker than he was while hiding the only copy of the truth in his sock. At the MP station, Price began feeling the cost of every assumption he had made. It showed in small ways. He reread his notes and noticed how quickly Cole's rank had entered the page. He saw the word civilian beside Mara's name and wondered whether he had written a fact or a convenience. He saw a possible assault and realized the phrase had protected him from choosing an offender too early. Neutral language could be useful. It could also become a hiding place. Holt had fewer illusions. She had served long enough to know that procedure was not the enemy. Selective procedure was. The chain of custody mattered. The recording log mattered. The timestamps mattered. Not because paperwork was noble, but because people like Hensley understood how to weaponize gaps. A missing minute, an unlogged call, an unscanned pouch, a vague entry. Each could become a door through which truth disappeared. When Mara said the word Black Lantern, Holt felt the world tilt. She did not know the operation, but she knew the kind of silence that followed it. Every service had ghost stories. Most were exaggerated. Some were warnings. A few were locked rooms with names still breathing inside them. Greer, miles away, watched Frank's video and understood something that made his old hands go still. He had spent 12 years keeping Mara away from rooms where men could turn her survival into a charge. He had told himself it was protection. He had told himself truth required timing, legal readiness, proof, and witnesses. All of that was partly true. That was what made it such a useful lie to live with. Then he saw Cole touch Daniel's ring. Some men understood classified material only when it came stamped and sealed. Greer understood the ring was more classified than the coin. The coin belonged to an operation. The ring belonged to a promise, a death, and the sentence Mara had served without trial. By the time tires screamed into the MP station parking lot, everyone inside knew the night had passed beyond assault, beyond evidence tampering, beyond one soldier's lie. 2 commands were coming for one room. One wanted the truth contained. One wanted the truth preserved. Mara stood between them, holding a coin and a wound older than most of the men giving orders. And outside, under the lights, the engines kept running. The front door opened like a verdict. Major Ellis Grant, Hensley's executive officer, arrived with aides and Captain Rowe from Fort Camden Legal. Grant directed Price to transfer the detainee to base command. Holt corrected him. "She is not a detainee." Grant replied that Greer was Navy and Fort Camden was Army. Mara said, "That is a very brave sentence to say into a recorded station log." Then Commander Rachel Voss, Naval Special Warfare Legal Liaison, arrived with a Navy officer. She issued a preservation order, not a jurisdictional transfer. All logs, recordings, statements, body cam, dispatch, evidence notes, and communications related to Mara, the coin, and Miller's rest must be preserved. Any deletion, editing, moving, reclassifying, or sanitizing would answer to more than Fort Camden. Price signed. The station was no longer a police station. It was a room full of orders pointing guns at each other. Frank entered with Bell and a flash drive. "This is a viewing copy. The original memory card never left my possession." The original goes into evidence with chain of custody, hash check, digital fingerprint, whatever your people need. He brought the backup. Grant tried to take Bell through command channels. Voss refused. Bell requested that his statement be recorded. The video was viewed in a controlled briefing room. Frank described the hidden backup camera and chain of custody. Grant accused him of altering evidence. Frank replied that he preserved evidence after one of Grant's soldiers destroyed the main system. The video played. The audio was ugly, tinny, and full of jukebox static. But the words were there. Cole. What's that? Dead husband? Cole. Whatever man gave you that, he should have taught you when to keep your mouth shut. Then the slap. Price went pale. Holt locked her jaw. Rowe whispered, Jesus. Grant said nothing. The video showed Mara's controlled self-defense. Turner running to the DVR, the main recording monitor going dark. Turner returning with the torn hard drive, the ring breaking, the coin falling, and Cole saying, Now it's 4 soldiers against 1 unstable woman. Price said, I was wrong. Mara answered, Being wrong is not the problem, Lieutenant. Staying wrong after you know better. Grant pivoted. The video changed the assault narrative, but Mara still carried classified material on an army installation under an unverifiable identity. When they could not make her the attacker, they would make her the threat. Voss countermanded Grant's attempt to control the station. Price logged everything. Bell gave a recorded statement. Maddox initiated contact. Mara did not strike first. Cole slapped her. Walsh attacked her. Turner ran for the DVR. Cole pressured Bell. Bell received a threat message and did not delete it. For the first time that night, Bell did not look like a coward. He looked like someone tired of being one. Cole arrived expecting control and found silence. He knew they had footage. Voss warned that video contradicted his account. Cole stepped toward Mara. Holt, Price, and even Grant moved. Mara did not. Cole realized they were not standing between him and Mara to protect her. They were protecting him from her. He was not the storm. He was only the fool who opened the door. Colonel Hensley arrived in dress uniform, too polished and too close to the base to have been surprised. He had started moving before the official call. He recognized Mara. She said, That is not what men usually call it when they read files they were not cleared to open. Hensley tried to release Mara, claiming she was free to go. Mara understood immediately. He wanted her outside the controlled log, outside recorded rooms, outside witnesses, outside Greer's preservation order. The first story made me the attacker. The second made me the classified liability. The third makes me disappear. Then Admiral Greer entered. He passed Cole without looking at him, stopped before Mara, saw the red mark on her cheek and the broken chain in her hand. I told you to call me if the past came looking. I was hoping it would get lost. Greer turned to Hensley. 12 years ago, Black Lantern was sealed by joint order. Then, who authorized Black Lantern to be reopened? Hensley lost color. Cole understood the bar fight had never been the real story. It was only the door. The video did not make everyone honest. That was not how evidence worked. Evidence did not transform character. It removed hiding places. For a few seconds after the slap appeared on the screen, the briefing room contained the rarest thing in any investigation. A fact no one could professionally misunderstand. Cole struck her first. There it was in poor audio and imperfect angle, in dust and static and bad light. There it was without rank, decoration, reputation, or command sponsorship. A man had crossed a room, touched what was not his, insulted the dead, and hit a woman who had warned him to stop. Everything after that changed shape. Mara's takedown became restraint. Walsh's injury became consequence. Turner's sprint became evidence destruction. Bell's silence became fear. Frank's anger became testimony. Price felt the shame of it settle into his stomach. Not because he had been fooled by a perfect lie, because the lie had not needed to be perfect. It had only needed to sound familiar. Injured soldiers, civilian suspect, broken camera, decorated staff sergeant, emotional bartender, quiet woman. Price had arranged those pieces into the easiest picture and called it procedure. That was why Mara's answer hurt him. Staying wrong after you know better. He had spent years believing integrity was something proved by not making mistakes. Now he understood it might be proved by what you did after the mistake had your signature near the bottom. Voss understood the room differently. She did not care whether Grant felt embarrassed. She cared whether embarrassment turned into movement. Men like Grant recovered by reframing. They did not need to disprove a video if they could make the video irrelevant. So she watched his hands, his eyes, his posture, the little inhale before he changed targets from assault to classified liability. There it was. Mara was no longer the attacker. Mara was the problem. A woman could be beaten and still become inconvenient. A victim could become a threat if the wrong institution had too much to lose by admitting she had been wronged. Frank wanted to say that out loud, but he held back. He had learned the value of letting lawyers build cages one sentence at a time. Voss was doing that. Every objection Grant made became record. Every attempt to move Bell became record. Every effort to label the video insufficient, the coin suspicious, Mara unverifiable, the station local, all of it went into the log price, now guarded like penance. Bell's statement changed him in a way he did not feel immediately. He expected relief. Instead, he felt exposed, like someone had removed the wall he had been leaning on, and now he had to find out whether his own legs worked. Holt's questions were gentle enough not to break him, and firm enough not to let him retreat. Say it clearly. That was the moment Bell understood. Truth did not become courage until it was audible. When he said Cole hit her first, he did not become a hero. He became accountable. That was better. Cole's arrival after the video had a terrible comedy to it. He came in with the body of a man expecting the room to bend around him, and discovered the room had learned a new shape. Grant would not meet his eyes. Turner looked sick. Voss looked prepared. Price looked ashamed but steady. Holt looked like she had finally decided where to stand. Mara looked at him as if he had already become part of a smaller story. That frightened Cole more than rage would have. Rage meant he still mattered. Hensley's arrival restored danger. Unlike Cole, he did not need volume. He carried atmosphere. His dress uniform was not vanity. It was message. He had come not as a man in crisis, but as command itself, polished and lawful and prepared to make disappearance sound like release. Then Greer entered, and even Hensley's polish dulled. The two men did not need to explain their history. It stood between them. Coast, Black Lantern, radio calls, signed updates. Names moved between categories by men not bleeding in the valley. Mara saw it pass across Greer's face, and knew part of him had been waiting 12 years for this confrontation, while another part had prayed it would never come. When Greer said Black Lantern had been sealed by joint order, the bar fight finally vanished as the center of the room. Cole felt it happen without understanding the shape of it. Frank understood. Bell understood enough. Holt understood that the word sealed was doing more work than any of them could yet see. Then Greer asked who reopened it, and the silence answered before Hensley could. Greer's question stayed in the room. Who authorized Black Lantern to be reopened? Hensley claimed not to know. Greer explained Black Lantern had been sealed by joint order. Navy, Army, Defense Intelligence, all names compartmentalized. Hensley countered that Mara's presence near Fort Camden was suspicious. Greer revealed he had asked retired operator Mara to remain near Fort Camden because 3 days earlier, someone accessed a sealed Black Lantern index from a Fort Camden terminal. That was the reopening, Colonel. Now we can stop pretending tonight began at Miller's Rest. Price pulled the logs. A Black Lantern sealed index query appeared from Admin Building 2, Secure Office 3B at 214. using R.Hensley-CMD credentials. Hensley argued credentials could be used by someone else. Voss ordered door access. Badge R. Hensley entered at 2:09 and exited at 2:22. Corridor camera had been manually disabled from 2:08 to 2:23 by the same credential. Your credentials, your badge, your camera override, Greer said. Voss, I am preserving the possibility. Frank muttered, that's lawyer for yes. Cole realized Hensley had not protected him. He had used him. If the room needed a sacrifice, Hensley had already chosen him. Voss ordered Cole and Turner separated. Greer confirmed with one word. Yes. Bell was placed under internal military protective status. No unit questioning without counsel, no reassignment, no disciplinary action connected to tonight without legal review. No private contact from Maddox, Turner, Grant, or Hensley's office. Bell said his career was over. Holt answered, no, your old version of it is. Bell added to his statement that other complaints existed. Other nights people stopped talking. Voss asked for names. Bell said yes. Greer and Hensley stood like men who once served near the same fire and pretended they had not smelled the smoke. Price reported more access events. Hensley query, Grant follow-up searches, Mara personnel query, and a restricted casualty file request. Hensley said, be careful, Tom. Greer answered, you lost the right to call me that in Coast Province. Black Lantern now had a map. Frank said he was forward medical support, close enough to hear the operation die. The radios lit up with American voices calling for extraction, despite command claiming no Americans were in the valley. Medical support was told to stand down. Mara said that by the time anyone admitted they existed, 6 men had already been marked dead. Not killed. Marked. Greer said, enough. Not to bury truth, but because he knew what truth did when it came out without armor. Mara refused. She said he had brought her back within reach of the command that buried her worst night, and he would not decide when enough truth had been spoken. She placed Daniel Vale's bent silver ring on the desk. Daniel had been Black Lantern's team lead. Not officially her husband, but close enough that no one asked what she meant. His family received a folded flag and a lie. Training accident off Virginia. Mechanical failure. No hostile contact. But Daniel did not die off the coast of Virginia. He died in coast with half his chest open, using one hand to hold pressure on another man's artery while he gave me this with the other. He told her to get the living out, so she did. 6 men were marked dead before they stopped breathing. 3 left off the manifest. 2 reported never deployed. 1 called a deserter for 36 hours because admitting capture would expose the operation. Hensley labeled Mara emotionally compromised. Voss told Price to log that Hensley was attempting to characterize witness trauma as unreliability. Price typed every word. Hensley argued that opening Black Lantern would destroy families, sources, foreign liaison denials, lawful order protections, and every choice Mara made to survive. It sounded responsible while burying bodies. Mara replied, and you will finally have to answer for the dead. Greer produced an old paper record. Black Lantern communication chain. Restricted review copy. Hensley's name was in the chain, not giving the final order, but close enough to hear extraction requests. You heard them alive, Greer said. And 31 minutes later, your office signed a casualty status update, marking them unrecoverable. Greer said why Black Lantern was sealed. Then he said what no report had said. Mara Ellison was not the liability. She was the witness. Hensley made his final attack. They sealed it to protect you from what you did to get out. Tell them about the final order. Tell them who gave it. Tell them why you were the only one who came home. Mara gripped Daniel's bent ring until it cut her palm. Part of her believed she deserved the pain. Mara had imagined Hensley many times over the years. In some versions, he was older and weaker, apologetic at last, a man crushed by the weight of what he had signed. In others, he was crueler, easier to hate, a villain with no human edges. The real Hensley was worse because he was neither. He was composed, reasonable. He spoke of sources, families, alliances, lawful orders, and consequences. He used responsible words the way Cole used his fists, to make other people smaller. That was why his argument frightened the room. Not because it was true, but because it contained pieces of truth arranged around a lie. Opening Black Lantern would hurt families. It would expose old agreements. It would force men who had followed orders to explain what they believed at the time. It would turn sealed grief into active damage. All of that was possible. Hensley knew it. Greer knew it. Mara knew it most of all. But the alternative was the same grave with a better lock. Price typed as if the keyboard were the only thing keeping him upright. He captured Hensley's words, Voss's objections, Greer's statements, Mara's corrections. Every sentence entered the log changed him. Earlier that night he had used paperwork to manage uncertainty. Now he used it to protect complexity from being simplified by men with power. Holt watched Mara's hand around Daniel's ring and understood that testimony was not simply information. It was physical labor. Every word Mara spoke cost something. The cost did not make the words unreliable. It made them heavier. Holt had seen men fake calm, fake pain, fake outrage. Mara was faking stillness. That was different. Stillness was the last shield of someone who had already spent all the easier ones. Frank listened to the details of Coast and felt old radio static crawl under his skin. For years he had remembered fragments. A frequency that should have been dead. Voices that should not have been American. Orders to stand down, repeated in language clean enough to survive review. He had told himself he had been peripheral, forward medical support, not inside. Close enough to hear, too far to change anything. But Mara's words erased that comfort. Proximity to a buried truth was still proximity. Bell did not understand Black Lantern, but he understood the pattern. Powerful man hurts someone. Other men explain why exposing it would create problems. Witnesses are warned to think about careers, units, families, missions, reputations. The truth becomes selfish because silence is framed as service. Bell had been inside that pattern for hours. Mara had been inside it for 12 years. That made his own fear feel smaller, but not meaningless. It made him want to keep speaking. Cole, isolated behind glass, began to understand another version of the same pattern. He had believed himself protected because he was useful muscle. Hensley's refusal to look at him had stripped that illusion away. Cole had spent years making other people disposable. Now he felt the sensation from inside the object being thrown away. Greer's paper record changed the air more than any digital log. Old paper had a graveyard smell. Ink, storage, hands that once hoped no one would unfold it again. Hensley recognized the header, and in that recognition, Mara saw confirmation more intimate than confession. He knew the file, he knew the chain, he knew the voices. When Greer said Hensley heard them alive, Mara felt the room tilt behind her eyes. She had always suspected. Suspicion was a sickness you learned to live with. Confirmation was surgery without anesthetic. 31 minutes. That was the number that entered her body and found every place grief still lived. 31 minutes between voices and paperwork. 31 minutes between men breathing and men marked unrecoverable. 31 minutes in which someone could have tried harder, pushed higher, refused cleaner language, chosen risk over reputation. Hensley's final attack was the cruelest because it knew where she already bled. Tell them why you were the only one who came home. It was not aimed at Greer, Voss, Price, Holt, or the log. It was aimed at the part of Mara that still woke at night hearing Daniel's order and wondering whether obedience could be a form of betrayal. The ring cut her palm, and she held it tighter. Some pain reminded her she was still there. Some pain she had never learned to put down. Hensley's question unlocked the room Mara had kept sealed for 12 years. Some memories did not stay memories when spoken aloud. They became air. They entered other people. Mara placed Daniel's ring beside the black coin. The final order was not mine. Hensley said, "No, but you carried it out." "Yes," Mara began. Black Lantern had been a hostage recovery operation in Coast Province. Small team, no footprint, no official presence. Intelligence was wrong before they crossed the line. The compound held 9 hostages, not 2, 3 already dead, 4 alive. Daniel Vale led the entry element. Mara was overwatch and extraction support. Someone had sold the route. The enemy knew the window, extraction point, emergency frequency, and sealed the valley after the team entered. The team called for extraction 11 times, medical twice, and transmitted proof of live hostages and casualties. Greer produced partial archive transcripts. Black Lantern, actual to command. We have live package, multiple wounded, request immediate extraction. Command response, negative extraction. Maintain position. Maintain position meant die quietly, Mara said. Daniel knew extraction was not coming. He gave the final order. Burn the site, not to hide evidence, not to kill their own, not to save Mara. The compound had a munitions cache under the east wall. The charge was directional. East wall only, away from the extraction corridor. Enemy fighters were pushing from the east. If they reached the inner gate, they would take living hostages, strip comms, and broadcast bodies by sunrise. He was buying everyone a corridor, Mara said. The blast killed 3 enemy fighters, 2 already dead hostages whose bodies could not be recovered, and Daniel. He was alive when I triggered it, and he ordered it. Hensley stepped forward. But only you survived to say that. Greer answered, "No. You were counting on that, Robert. But she was not the only one who survived." Greer produced hostage 4, Dr. Samir al-Khatib. The dead were easier to erase, the living were harder. I spent 12 years looking for a living voice you forgot to bury. An old recording played. Dr. Samir stated that Daniel Vale ordered the East Wall cache detonation after confirming no living hostages remained inside the blast radius, except himself and enemy combatants closing on the position. He said Valkyrie refused at first, tried to reach Daniel, and only activated the charge after Daniel repeated the order and the wounded had passed the inner gate. Then came the line that broke the room. She carried 2 men after the blast. 1 American, 1 hostage. She came back for me when the building was burning. I was not able to walk. She dragged me through smoke. She was injured. She did not leave the living. For 12 years, Mara had carried Daniel's final order like a blade under her ribs. Now someone else had said it aloud. Not as accusation, as witness. Cole stepped out of interview room 3. "I want to amend my statement." He did not become good. He realized Hensley was going to let him burn. Cole admitted he hit Mara, lied, and ordered Turner to pull the drive. He insisted he did not know about Black Lantern. He revealed Hensley's office called Turner before MPs arrived, instructing that if footage existed, the matter had to stay local. No outside review, no Navy. Hensley did not deny it. He smiled and asked if anyone knew how many things stayed buried, because the men who knew the truth knew the cost to dig. Greer ordered Hensley, relieved of access to all Black Lantern material pending joint investigation. His access frozen, office sealed, communications preserved. Hensley objected that Greer had no authority to relieve an Army colonel. Greer replied he had authority to trigger the review that made every protector part of the same file. Power did not always collapse loudly. Sometimes it simply found no one willing to stand beside it. The next hour was not victory. It was paperwork, statements, body cam downloads, phone seizures, evidence bags, separate rooms, legal calls. Hensley was escorted away. Not arrested, not yet, but his access was frozen, and every person who had protected him began deciding whether loyalty still looked safe. Grant requested counsel. Turner refused to speak when told the torn drive had fingerprints and backup video had his face. Walsh was held pending review of false statement. Cole left under guard after confessing assault, witness intimidation, false statement, and ordering destruction of evidence. Bell signed his amended statement with Holt beside him. Price locked the preliminary log and sent copies before anyone could tell him not to. Frank handed over the original memory card like a surgeon handing over the only organ that could save a patient. Mara stood in the hallway, still in gray hoodie, still with dried blood at her mouth, still holding the ring and coin. Not healed, not fixed, not forgiven, changed. At 6:12, Greer convened the first recorded joint review statement. Let the record reflect that events at Miller's Rest began with an assault committed by Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox against Mara Ellison. He recorded that video contradicted Maddox, Turner, and Walsh. The Bell provided corrected testimony and evidence of witness intimidation. That Hensley was relieved of Black Lantern access pending joint review into unauthorized access, evidence suppression, and potential falsification of historic casualty status. Then Greer looked at Mara. Let the record reflect that Lieutenant Daniel Vale, previously misreported under unrelated casualty circumstances, was team lead during Operation Black Lantern in Coast Province. His status, actions, and final order will be reviewed for correction in official record. Some burdens did not fall away all at once. Sometimes they loosened one finger at a time. Greer looked into the camera. Let the record reflect that Mara Ellison was not the liability. She was the witness. Miller's Rest did not open that morning. Frank put up a handwritten sign. Closed for repairs. Bell came by, out of uniform, eyes red, and thanked Frank for not letting him stay a coward. Frank nodded toward Mara's booth. I didn't do that. She did. Bell asked what happened now. Frank said, now the men who love paperwork learn what it feels like when the paperwork loves them back. Mara left Fort Camden at sunrise. No escort, no ceremony, no apology big enough to matter. Greer walked with her to the parking lot. Where will you go? I don't know. That is not a plan. No. Greer said Daniel's mother would want to meet her. Samir, too. Mara said maybe. Greer said, you saved the living. For 12 years, those words had sounded like a sentence when Mara said them to herself. From Greer, they sounded like permission. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Permission to stop carrying the dead alone. Greer handed her an old envelope. A letter from Daniel Vale's mother. After tonight, Daniel's mother would no longer believe he died in a training accident. Mara opened it just enough to see the first line. If anyone ever tells you how my son really died, please tell me whether he was afraid. Mara folded it closed before the tears could come. She slid Daniel's bent ring back into the black coin case and put the case in her pocket. For the first time all night, her hand came away empty. Before driving away, Mara looked back at the MP station, the dawn, and the road beyond the gate. Tell them his name right. I will, Greer said. Mara drove out past the gate without looking back. Not because the past was gone. It was not. The past never left people like Mara Ellison. But that morning, for the first time in 12 years, it did not sit only in her passenger seat. It was in the record, in the log, in the testimony, in the video, in the voice of a surviving doctor, in the name Daniel Vale, spoken correctly at last. For 12 years, Mara had carried the dead alone. That night, the truth finally carried her back. Long after Mara drove through the gate, Fort Camden kept moving. That was the strange cruelty of institutions. The sun came up, coffee brewed, duty rosters changed, trucks rolled, recruits ran in formation, past buildings where officers had spent the night deciding what kind of truth would be allowed to survive. The world did not stop when a grave opened. It simply made room for the paperwork. But this time, the paperwork had witnesses watching it being born. Price stayed at the station until his eyes burned, and his uniform looked slept in, though he had not slept. He checked the log 3 times before sending it, then checked the distribution list twice more. Fort Camden, legal. Naval Special Warfare legal. Inspector General Liaison. Military Police Command, Greer's office, Voss's secure channel. There would be consequences for sending too much to too many people. There would have been worse consequences for sending too little to too few. Holt found him staring at the screen after the final copy transmitted. "You okay, sir?" she asked. Price almost gave the automatic answer. Then he stopped. Automatic answers had done enough damage for one night. "No," he said, "but I think that might be appropriate." Holt nodded. "Yes, sir." Across the hall, Bell sat alone with a paper cup of water he had not touched. His amended statement was done. His protective status was logged. His phone was evidence now. He kept looking at his empty hands as if expecting Cole's shadow to still be there. It was not gone. Men like Cole did not leave your nervous system all at once. But Bell had put something between himself and that shadow. A recording, a signature, names, and the memory of Mara saying, "Not yet." Not yet had become now. Frank returned to Miller's Rest and noticed every scar the night had left on the place. A chair leg cracked near the pool table. A smear on the floor where Walsh had fallen. A dent in the hallway near the ruined DVR box. The cigarette machine, empty again, looking innocent. Frank stood before it for a long moment and touched the rusted side like one might touch an old dog that had done its job. "Good machine," he muttered. Then he laughed once because he was tired. Because the laugh hurt, and because sometimes men survived by making jokes in rooms where ghosts were still standing. At Norfolk, before Greer filed his formal memorandum, he replayed Dr. Samir's statement once more. He did not need to. The words were already carved into him. She did not leave the living, but Greer listened because Mara had carried that sentence without hearing it from anyone else for 12 years, and the least he could do now was make sure the record would never lose it again. He began the memorandum with Daniel Vale's name. Not the operation code, not the jurisdictional conflict, not the assault. The name. Names first, he decided. Codes later. Mara drove for almost an hour before pulling over beside a stretch of road where the morning had turned pale gold. She took the coin case from her pocket and placed it on the passenger seat. For a moment she expected the old weight to return immediately, the familiar pressure of the dead asking why she was still moving. It came, but softer. Not gone. Never gone. But quieter, as if another hand had taken part of the load. She opened Daniel's mother's letter again. Just the first line. Then the second. "If anyone ever tells you how my son really died, please tell me whether he was afraid. Please tell me whether he was alone." Mara pressed the paper to her knee and stared at the empty road until the words stopped swimming. She did not know how to answer yet. She only knew the answer mattered. Daniel had been afraid. Everyone had been afraid. Courage was never the absence of fear in that valley. It was what men and women did while fear rode in their blood like fire. He was not alone. That, at least, she could tell his mother. For the first time in 12 years, Mara thought of a future event and did not immediately look for an exit. A meeting, a doorbell, an older woman's face, a folded flag, a ring placed on a table between truth and grief. It would hurt. It might hurt worse than the slap, worse than the station, worse than hearing Samir's voice across a speaker. But pain that carried truth was different from pain that guarded a lie. Mara folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the coin case. Then she started the truck again. Behind her, Fort Camden grew smaller in the mirror. Ahead of her, the road opened without promise. That was enough. Promises had failed in Coast. Orders had failed. Reports had failed. Systems had failed, but witnesses had not. Frank had watched. Bell had spoken. Holt had recorded. Price had corrected. Greer had found the living voice. Samir had remembered. Daniel's name had entered the record. Mara drove on, not free of the dead. Free, finally, from being their only witness.